Let's turn back to Luke 12, 13 to 21. So you think about that question that is the question of Holiday Bible Club. What is the point of your life? Or put it this way, what is the meaning to life? Famously in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe and everything is calculated by this. If you've read the book, it's calculated by this enormous supercomputer named Deep Thought. And over a period of 7.5 million years, it churns away and it comes up with the answer to life, the universe and everything. And if you've read the book, you know the answer is 42. Yeah. Unfortunately, so that's the answer. Oops, sorry, I need to switch this on. That's the answer. The problem is no one knows what the question is. Thus, if you read the book, to calculate the ultimate question, the Earth actually is a special computer built to calculate what the question is. Now, in his book, Douglas Adams is giving a not-so-subtle dig at religion there. In fact, he puts his finger on an issue that we have to wrestle with in Holiday Bible Club this year. Due to, as Karen's explained, due to COVID restrictions, the period is just going to be 2 days. We're going to repeat that. So each group is really going to look at 2 days about Jesus. Question number 1, Jesus, do we need him? And day 2, how he saves us from our sin. Now, when I was at school, it was quite common to see badges. People would want to have badges, and they would say things like, one of my friends had was, it said, Jesus saves, but Dalglish gets the rebound. For those who don't remember that far back, Kenny Dalglish used to play for Liverpool Football Club at the time. And another one was Jesus saves, but he wouldn't on my salary. Now, the fact that you're sort of groaning at those corny jokes, but the fact that nobody tells those kind of jokes today shows what a hard job we have in Holiday Bible Club this year. See, most people in Britain today don't think that they need Jesus at all. My hunch is if you went out on the streets, in Oxford Street or something, and did one of those sort of Vox Pop polls, and if you stopped people and asked them and said, Jesus is the answer, I guess most would respond by saying, a bit like Douglas Adams, well, it's a pretty stupid question then. Which is why I love stories in Luke's Gospel like this one in Luke chapter 12. Because although, as we heard, although it was specifically addressing the issue of greed, we don't have time to look into that this morning. The story Jesus tells also has a much wider application, doesn't it? Because regardless of your religious background, especially in verse 20, Jesus lays down a challenge that everybody, and I mean everybody, has to answer. Verse 20, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you, then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? Now, of course, an atheist, for example, wouldn't think that God would say anything. But if you take that out, the question itself still remains, doesn't it, for everybody? Number 1, everybody dies without exception. Death is an absolute scientific fact. Number 2, you could die at any moment. Car accident, cancer, terrorist bomb, the coronavirus could happen any day. And then, who profits from your life? Or put it this way, what is the point of your life? Because that is a question that everybody, and I mean everybody, has to answer, surely. I could die tomorrow, and if so, what is the point of anything I do today? And I really mean that seriously. For example, I could work today, but if I'm working today just purely to earn money, to get food, to live during the week, or maybe go on holiday, what's the point? My death brings into question, why are you doing this if all you're doing is to live a bit longer? So what we're going to do this morning, just briefly look at this story that Jesus told and think about that question as it applies to us personally, but also, of course, to all that we're doing in Holiday Bible Club. And first of all, we see in the story that the man is talking to himself. It has such a modern ring to it, doesn't it? The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Now, it's a nice problem to have, isn't it? But the way he reacts to the situation reveals, it tells everything we need to know about him. In fact, literally translated, the text says he dialogued with himself. He had a conversation with himself. Now, something like that sounds completely natural in our modern Western sort of individualistic culture. But it would have been quite shocking in the ears of Jesus' original listeners. In the Middle East, 2,000 years ago, in fact, even today, village people make decisions about important, things they've got to do in life, always by talking, after long discussions with their friends and families. Families, communities, and villages are tightly knit together. Everybody's business is everybody else's business. Even trivial decisions are made after long discussion with family and friends. But this man, in their culture it appears, has no friends. His wealth has severed his relationships with others, isolating him from everyone else, especially from God. So now he thinks the only person worth listening to is himself. Because we notice there's no mention of his employees, the ones who have done and will do all the work. Rather, he knows only my crop, my barn, my grain, my goods, and my soul. And at the end of this self-centered litany, he thinks, I will say to myself, literally, I will say to my soul, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now notice that Jesus is not denouncing capitalism here. The man's terrible mistake he makes is one of presumption. Again, we notice his motto, my money, my time, my life. But God said to him in verse 20, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? I've said it before, one of my favourite anecdotes involves the funeral of a very rich American. I can't remember. I think this was J.D. Rockefeller. Anyway, there was a journalist who'd been given the job by his paper to sort of cover this lavish funeral. And he managed to grab the minister and get the minister alone for a second in the middle of the day. And he whispered to him, how much did he leave? At which point the minister leant forward and whispered, everything. Your life will be demanded of you. Now, the language Jesus uses there is the language of the return of a loan. And that is really important because that is one of the major truths of Scripture. Life is not a right, but a gift. We are given our lives on loan. We have no rights, neither for 10 days nor 80 years. Each day is a gift from God, which, by the way, is why in the Lord's Prayer we pray, give us this day our daily bread, reflecting the same truth. But the rich man in the story, he gave no thought at all to what lay beyond death, and so what a shock to discover that death was not the end, but that he would face Jesus himself, the one telling this story at the Last Judgment. He currently faced an eternity of separation from God. Now again, of course, I realise that, for example, an atheist would not accept that life is a gift from God. But can you see that everyone, even an atheist, must surely have to wrestle with the arbitrary nature of life and death that Jesus is talking about here? Each one of us could die any day, and our mortality at least raises huge questions, doesn't it, about the purpose of our lives. What is the purpose of your life? As Kenneth Bailey puts it in his commentary, the voice of God de-absolutizes material possessions by reminding the rich man that he does not know and cannot control who will acquire power over his wealth. He may have a will, but when the dust settles, who in the end will own his wealth? That's true of individuals. It's also true of societies like churches and charities. I'm all in favour of things like doctrinal statements, but I'm not naive about their limitations. Frequently, churches and Christian charities spend a lot of effort sort of writing rules and regulations and laws, in effect to try and keep the next generation on the rails. That's largely a waste of time, I have to say, because the next generation will do what the next generation has always done, and that is wait until we've gone and do whatever they want. They just change the rules if they want. So instead of talking to ourselves, hence Jesus' punchline, verse 21, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. See, that, Jesus says, is the only thing that really matters. The only thing worth passing on to the next generation. The thing that Holiday Bible Club has got to be all about. That's the question. Are you rich towards God? However, at this point, you might be thinking about how can I tell this story that Jesus tells in Luke 12. He doesn't explain, he just says the important thing is to be rich towards God. But how do you do that? How do I know if I'm rich towards God? Well, as Karen has already explained, in the rest of Luke's Gospel, that question is explained, it is answered. For example, in chapter 18, Jesus told another parable. Another story. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus concludes, I tell you that this man, the tax collector, rather than the other man, the Pharisee, went home justified before God. You see, some people, some children, think that the way we become rich towards God is by storing up, as it were, earning our way forward, doing good deeds, earning kind of spiritual wealth. But in Luke 18, Jesus says it was the tax collector who went home justified. It was the tax collector who went home rich towards God. And he became rich by simply trusting and calling out for God's mercy. In fact, literally, in the Greek, what the tax collector asks for is he says, God, make atonement for me, the sinner. Is literally what he says. That is, he is saying, God, you're going to have to provide a sacrifice to cleanse my sin so that I can be right with you. That's what he's asking. And of course, in Luke's Gospel, as we're going to find out in Holiday Bible Club, Luke goes on to explain that when Jesus died on the cross, he died to do that, to do what the tax collector asked for, to be a sacrifice, to deal with the sins of the world, so that we could be rich towards God. Indeed, as we're going to see in Holiday Bible Club, we have another example of what it means to be rich towards God with the thief who died on the cross alongside Jesus. In chapter 23, the thief to whom Jesus promises, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Have you ever thought about that? Can you imagine what it was like in heaven later that day when this guy turned up? Can you imagine the angels asking, how did you get in? I don't know. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? What's your doctrine of justification? Don't know what you're talking about. What do you believe about the Bible? What's a Bible? Well, come on then. Who let you in? How did you get in? The guy on the middle cross invited me. That's it. That is the only way to be rich towards God. the only way to face death, the only thing to say when God wants back the life he's lent you. So back in Luke chapter 12, we see that this is how we become rich towards God. Not by earning spiritual credits or by keeping the rules, but by trusting in the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross for us. Yet today, many people, many of us maybe, live like this man, if we're honest. We rarely give God a thought. He certainly has no meaningful place in our lives. In fact, even when God speaks to us or tries to speak to us through the joys and pleasures of life, the beauty maybe of the created world, we turn a deaf ear. And then when he shouts at us more loudly through suffering and adversity, we turn around and we say to him, God, why have you done this to me? I've never bothered you before. Exactly. That is our problem. We're made to know and love God, but each one of us have turned away from him in rebellion, wanting to live our lives our way. We haven't bothered him at all. We've had nothing to do with him. We are certainly not rich towards him. So this is really serious, as we see in this story that Jesus told. Everyone will one day die. And the only thing, therefore, that gives our lives meaning is being rich towards the Creator, God himself. And if all of this is true, that's why Holiday Bible Club is so important, because it means everybody does need Jesus. It means all the children, whatever background they come from, they need to know urgently how to be rich towards God. Whatever background, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, atheists even. Everybody, including me, including you. All of which brings us back to that question we started with, the ultimate question about life, the universe, and everything. It isn't 42. It really is Jesus. And our own mortality surely brings up the most important existential question that any human being could ever ask. We cannot avoid it. In fact, surely that is the one question that this pandemic is supposed to be teaching us if we will listen. That our only hope in life is to be rich towards God. And that the only way we can be rich towards God is by trusting in the sacrifice of Jesus. So that's the question I want to leave with all of us today, this morning. What about you? You may or may not view yourself as a sinner. That might not be a category you really understand. Maybe you don't think today that you need saving from anything. But even if that is you, what do you make of verse 20? Surely everyone has got to have some response to verse 20. This very night your life may be demanded from you, then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? What is the point of your life? Are you ready to face the reason for your existence? Or, as Jesus put it, are you a fool? Now, if you're not a fool, I hope you're not a fool. I would love to talk to you after. If you're in the church, I'd love to talk to you after the service. If you're watching online, please, you can use the website to send an email in. Myself, Karen, others would love to talk and explain how you can trust in Jesus and how you can be rich towards God. I'm just going to pause there. And normally at this point I would pray, but what we're going to do is we're going to move into communion. So as we prepare to do that, instead of me praying, I'm just going to give some silence for you to think about that question. What is the point of your life? So a few moments silence, and then I'm going to move over to communion.